It's time for the Kim Hammer Show, where you'll learn how your state government affects you, your family, and community. Here's Kim Hammer.
Good Saturday afternoon. Thank you for joining me here on the Kim Hammer Show. I'm going to get away from all the casual stuff. We're going to get right into the meat of it because it's going to be a very important hour. It's packed in with a lot of good information that you're going to want to know. I will tell you, if you want to go up to my website, which is www.thekimhammershow.com, www.thekimhammershow.com. You'll be able to capture this segment again, either off of this or off of the blog, one or the other, and be able to replay it, because my guest today, I have Clint Lancaster in studio, who's an attorney from Benton, worked on the case up in Wisconsin regarding investigation into election integrity. He is in studio. He was on a couple weeks ago, kind of laid the groundwork for today, because this is an important week for those of you that are interested in election integrity, what's happening in other parts of the country, making sure that what is done here is safe and secure. And we have joining us Justice Michael Gableman, who was appointed by the Wisconsin Legislature to lead the investigation into integrity issues with the election process in the state of Wisconsin. And so to both of you gentlemen, thank you for joining me today on the Kim Hammer Show.
Thank you, Jim.
All right. Michael, let's do it this way. The report came out this week that you were retained in order to provide. So Clint kind of gave a little bit of leeway or lead in a couple of weeks ago, but just to refresh everybody's memory, how did you get in the position that you're in to do what you were asked to do, and what exactly was it that you were asked to do by the Wisconsin Legislature?
Last July, the Speaker of our Assembly, Representative Robin Voss, called me, and a lot of people in Wisconsin, and I think the polling data shows that a majority of the people in Wisconsin have serious doubts about the accuracy of the reported results of the November 3rd, 2020 election in Wisconsin. And Speaker Voss called me and originally asked if I would coordinate a team of 3 investigators who he had hired or was in the process of hiring, and that I would be responsible for coordinating their efforts and then issuing a report based upon those findings after the investigation was completed. And so then that kind of evolved into a situation where it turned out to be a little more heavy of a lift, because there actually was very substantial evidence of wrongdoing. And so pretty much Speaker Voss left it up to my own discretion as to how to put together an office. So 6 months ago, I found myself appointed the special counsel, and an office of special counsel was created by the legislature. And then I had to, staff it and find lawyers and get everything, copiers, furniture. And Clint Lancaster came highly recommended, and he has been an enormous blessing to our office. And then the speaker directed me to issue a report concerning my findings, and we issued an interim report last November and what we're calling a second interim report on Tuesday.
All right. Let me ask you this. What is it about your background that you were chosen to lead the investigation? Because I think it's important for people to know what the quality of the person is doing the investigation, because you can hire somebody to do an investigation, but if they come into it with a bias or maybe not as well qualified. So I'm just curious, why is it that the speaker up there chose you to lead this investigation? What skill sets do you have that you were the person chosen?
Kim, I ask myself that every day. No, I'm just kidding.
Were you first on the list, or were you fifth on the list? That's what I want to know.
I have no way of knowing for sure, but you know what? Seneca, the Roman philosopher Seneca, has said something so many years ago, which I think of almost on a daily basis, which is, he who is squeamish should not dig in the sand. So I don't know that I need to know if I was 15th or 5th or 1st on the list. But in all seriousness, I started out as an assistant district attorney in this state in the early 1990s, and then I became a district attorney running my own office, and then I became a circuit court judge, which is our highest level of state trial court here in Wisconsin, and I served there on the trial court bench for 6 years, and then I was elected in 2008 in a statewide election to the Wisconsin Supreme Court. We have 7 members of the Wisconsin Supreme Court who served 10-year terms, and my 10 years was concluded in 2018. I took a couple of years break, I suppose, and then I think that's what compelled Speaker Voss. And I think too, I have a reputation. I exercised a judicial philosophy, a conservative judicial philosophy, that was what I ran on and what I promised people that I would do, and I kept faith with the people for all 10 years. And so I think that a lot of the people that Speaker Voss was trying to demonstrate that this investigation was in fact going to be the real thing, they knew me, because a lot of them had supported me 12 or 13 years ago when I ran for the court. And I kept in touch with people. I made myself very publicly available. And, when you do that, as you know, Kim, from your work, you make yourself a little bit vulnerable to all sorts of things. And it's a risk I took because I thought it was important not to just get people's vote, but to update them on what was really going on. And that's the other reputation I have, which is I tell people what's really going on. And I certainly sat through, while I was coming up in electoral politics, I certainly sat through, and I'm sure you do every day, Clint does, where you're in meetings and the words that people use seem more often chosen to hide what's really happening, or at least really camouflage what's really happening. And as opposed to just coming in and giving my fellow citizens, I decided that I was just going to give my fellow citizens the gift of candor. And there was no reason not to tell them what precisely was going on. And so that's the kind of reputation I had when Speaker Voss in August of last year announced that I would be leading this investigation.
All right. And then I've got another question, and then we're going to get into the meat of the report. And let me ask you, before I ask you this question, then the meat report, where can we go to see that report, or is it on a website, or what can you give me that people could go and look at it if they wanted to?
We're putting it up on WIElectionreview.org.
WIElectionreview.org.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is it up there now, or y'all are going to be putting it up there?
As of this morning, I think we were having a few problems with it, but we're getting it up. We're a lean office, my friend, and sometimes that leads to a little bit of a delay in time.
Not that
we have other things up there for anyone who's interested, so please go to WIElectionreview.org and check it out.
Okay, so let me ask you about the WIElectionreview.org. Is that something that was set up as part of this report, or was it an already existing website that is maintained by somebody, and this is going to be what hosts the report?
The second one, it had been up, and that's where we're going to put the report.
Okay, very good. All right, so my next question is this. Clint, Lancaster's down here in Benton, Arkansas, which is a great place. I think we're number 22 most popular place, best place to live in the United States. It's a great place to live, Benton and Saline County. How in the world did you pick Clint Lancaster, and why did you pick Clint Lancaster to help you on this investigation? How'd you find him? Why'd you pick him?
Well, I certainly asked a lot of my friends for good recommendations. Kim, I have to start out by saying one of the great disappointments of the past 6 months is how fearful just about every Wisconsin lawyer has been to work on this issue, because their partners in their law firms have made it very clear to them that they will be punished if they help out in the investigation. And I'm not going to say that's why all of them refuse to do it, but that's why a lot of them do it. And so there really is this stumbling block, which is people are afraid that it would be viewed as participation in this investigation would be viewed as helpful to former President Trump. And because of that they would lose business, that the law firms would lose business. And so I really had to work hard. It turns out we have one attorney on staff, Attorney Kevin Scott, who is a Wisconsin lawyer, but he was not on board at the time. I was really working hard to set the office up. And one of the lawyers I reached out to is a very well-known, one of the most highly regarded attorneys in our state, excellent litigator, a man named Attorney Jim Trupus. And he had been a former circuit court judge, but before that, a partner in one of our state's major law firms. And then he went on to start his own public interest law firm. So a really seasoned guy. And I asked Jim Trupus for any recommendations that he had. And he said that he had worked with Attorney Lancaster and highly recommended him. And then Clint and I had some good conversations, and it went from there.
Okay. And the reason I ask all that is because whenever committees or investigative teams are put together, the credibility of the report is based on the credibility of those that have put together the report. And there needs to be, there needs to be credibility as far as what's going to be put out as a product that's been unbiased, that has not been intimidated to produce a result that is anything less than just the facts. And that's part of the reason why I'm asking you, is because I wanted you to be able to defend, if you felt you needed to, that the team that you put together is just after the facts and just want to get the facts out there.
And the biggest proof I have of that is the fact that all of the documents that went into the formulation of the report and its conclusions, as well as my recommendations, we are currently in the process of printing out thousands of pages of documents, so that our end goal will be to deliver them to the legislature in the coming few days. And I promised to do that from the beginning. In my first appearance in front of the Assembly Committee on Campaigns and Elections was in November. And I pledged to do that. And the main reason why I wanted to do that was for the precise reason that you just said. And that is so that nobody had to take my word for it. Nobody has to take Clint's word for it. Nobody just has to take it on faith that the conclusions we arrived at in the report are based on, as you say, just the facts, because we're going to make all of those documents publicly available and people can read for themselves. I really have faith, as our founders did. I really, and I think a lot of public officials no longer have this faith in the people. We talk a lot about the people have lost faith in their elected leaders, but I think that a lot of the elected leaders have really lost faith and confidence in the wisdom of the people, when in fact, that is the whole form of our government. Our power, our authority is on temporary loan from our fellow citizens. And so I really want to put them in the driver's seat when it comes to making up their minds as to what happened. Because if I don't do that, then nothing that I'm recommending, nothing that the report recommends would ever occur. And I think we've got desperate need for reform in this state so that people can recapture the confidence that they used to have but no longer have in our Wisconsin elections administration system.
All right, let's get into the report. What have you found? And let's just open it. Let's just start with an open-ended question like that. What have you found, and take it from there. Two major
findings. Two major findings of it include the existence of an elections bribery scheme that unfortunately involved the administration of our 5 largest cities in this state. And it was a very simple and straightforward conspiracy. And it involves a relatively small universe of very experienced actors. And when I say it, if someone's just tuning in on this radio program, on your radio program, Kim, and saying it's going to seem like a lot of information, but it's not. Because if after 10 minutes, after 5 minutes, you keep hearing the same names of the same players over and over. And the scheme was this. At some point prior to 2020, Mark Zuckerberg, the owner of Facebook, decided that he wanted to do everything he could to defeat President Trump. And he set aside almost $500 million, that's with a B, almost $500 million, more to the point, about $400 million. And he divided that money up into to transfer that money to 2 different organizations. And to help him do that, he needed the guidance of an expert political operator who knew precisely what to do with the money in order to defeat Donald Trump. And he found a man called David Plouffe, Plouffe. Now, David Plouffe is one of the 2 major political geniuses who worked to bring Barack Obama up from the streets of Chicago, where he had been a community organizer, to the White House. And David Plouffe was and is an expert Democrat political operative. And so Mark Zuckerberg hired David Plouffe, and David Plouffe wrote a book called Citizen's Guide to Beating Donald Trump. Not too subtle, right? Not too subtle in his intent.
Yeah, that was hidden in the title, wasn't it? But
so if we read between the lines and wade through the subtleties, we can see that he's not a big fan of former President Trump. So he wrote the book Citizen's Guide to Beating Donald Trump, and that's who Mark Zuckerberg hired to be his political operator for putting the scheme into place where Zuckerberg would be able to embed, that's the word they used, embed his employees and his operatives into the administration of public elections, not only in Wisconsin's 5 largest cities, but throughout the country in the swing states, but also places where you wouldn't ordinarily expect them to be, more red states. And that would be the subject, I think, for a whole new investigation and a whole new program. So we'll stick to the swing states, and more particularly the swing state of Wisconsin. You see, David Plouffe, after the 2016 election, when President Trump won the election, a few days after the election, on November 11, 2016, David Plouffe, who was to become Mark Zuckerberg's director of political operations, David Plouffe wrote a letter to the New York Times, an editorial describing how it was that Hillary Clinton lost the election. And in that letter, written a few days after the 2016 presidential election, David Plouffe said that Hillary had not spent enough time in Wisconsin and that Hillary had not put enough effort into turning out the African American vote. And so that's echoed in Plouffe's book, Citizen's Guide to Beating Donald Trump, where he tells the reader, he wrote it in summer of 2019, but it got published in early 2020. And he tells the reader that the 2020 election is likely going to come down to a block by block political war zone in cities like Milwaukee and Philadelphia and Detroit, all for the effort of turning out the African American vote. And the reason for that is the studies that have been done by the organizations who report these things accurately is, as a rule, African American voters tend to vote about 86% Democrat. And so that's why Plouffe is putting such an emphasis on the need to turn out the African American vote. And so Plouffe, as the steward of Mark Zuckerberg's $400 million, takes $330 million and gives it to this outfit called Center for Tech and Civic Life, headquartered in Chicago, in former President Obama's original campaign headquarters. They literally have the same offices. And that makes sense because the people who run Center for Tech and Civil Life, Tiana Epps Johnson and some others, Tiana is a graduate of the Obama has a fellowship program. And that's where she worked for 2 years. And her whole job up until that time was to learn how to get out the Democrat profile voter, turn out the Democrat vote. That's Tiana Epps Johnson. So David Plouffe takes $330 million of Mark Zuckerberg's money and gives it to Tiana Epps Johnson and gives her the directive to get out the vote, and more to the point, do everything you can to turn out the African American vote, because we know that way Biden will win. And Tiana Epps Johnson then comes within a month of her graduating from this Obama fellowship program. Within a month is then in Wisconsin, in our 5 largest cities, all with Democrat mayors. And they are signing a contract where the mayors of these 5 biggest cities are going to get $8.8 million. But they're not going to get that as a grant or a gift. They're going to get it as part of a contract. And if at any time the 5 mayors or their staffs fail to do what CTCL tells them to do, CTCL, by the way, which had an operating budget in previous years of about $1 million, so not the biggest operation you ever heard of. So Zuckerberg's Plouffe taking Zuckerberg's $330 million and giving it to CTCL really made, I think, a lot of people there rich.
Hey, let me, I got to interrupt you. Hang on a second. I got to take a break, but we're going to be off for about a minute and a half. Everybody, we'll be right back. While we're on the break, if you want to go up to the KimHammerShow.com, you can get familiar with that website. But also, if you didn't hear a while ago, you can go up to the website where the report that's going to be coming out here, maybe today or in the next few days, WI Election Review, WIElectionReview.org, and watch that website in order to get the report. You're listening to the Kim Hammer Show. When you come back, we'll pick up with Justice Michael Gableman and in studio Clint Lancaster. Be right back to the Kim Hammer Show. Welcome back to the Kim Hammer Show. We have on today as our guest the Justice Michael Gableman, who was appointed by the Wisconsin Legislature to investigate election integrity issues. in the Wisconsin election during the presidential election back in 2020. All right, go ahead and pick up where you were there as we had to drop off.
So then the head of Center for Tech and Civic Life's CTCL contracts with the cities, and in order to get the Zuckerberg money that CTCL is distributing, the cities have to agree to run their elections the way that CTCL tells them to. So they really sort of rented out their offices and their elections infrastructure and sold it out to people whose sole concern was to defeat Donald Trump. And you say a reasonable question right now would be, well, gee, how are they able to get away with that? What's wrong with you people in Wisconsin? Why didn't you put a stop to it? The reason is it was all done under the radar, under the table. The mayors met in secret meetings from which the public was excluded. And then when they announced it to the public, they said it was for COVID safety, which, number one, none of the cities needed any of Mark Zuckerberg's money for COVID safety. And that was proven true by the fact that they didn't spend any money on COVID safety, less than 1% of the $8.8 million the records show. And so what did the mayors do? They did exactly what David Plouffe described in the book. CTCL comes to town and says we're going to give you money to protect your citizens from COVID. So far, so good. It sounds good to everybody. But then when it actually comes time to sign the contract, in order to get the money, which was subject to a clawback provision. So if at any time the 5 cities decided to not follow the instructions and orders of CTCL, then they had to give the $8.8 million back, which doesn't sound like much of a grant to me. It sounds more like a contract for employment. And so CTCL is giving them the instructions through this grant contract to follow through on David Plouffe's plan that he announced a few days after the 2016 election and in his book, Citizen's Guide to Beating Donald Trump, which is that you in Milwaukee will now use the city elections administration. You in the city of Racine, we will now use your public elections administration apparatus. You in the city of Green Bay, Wisconsin, you will now do what David Plouffe told us was the plan for beating Donald Trump, and that is that you will drive up the vote. You will do whatever it is. You will send special, in Racine bought a Winnebago to go pick black voters up to get them to the polls. And that's all right in the contract. I'm not insinuating anything. I don't have to infer anything. Nothing was left implied in these contracts. It says CTCL orders their servants in the 5 cities, you are to provide special services to the African American voter to get them to the poll. And they used a lie. They used a false term called historically disenfranchised voters. Well, okay, in history, there were disenfranchised voters, but disenfranchised means people don't have the right to vote. And all of the polling data show that African Americans as a group vote and have voted for at least the last 20 years at about the same rates that everybody else has. So this was not, we're way far afield from COVID safety. The whole COVID safety thing was a lie. It was a pretext to get Mark Zuckerberg and the partisan David Plouffe and the partisan CTCL into Wisconsin's 5 largest cities in order to drive up the vote among voters who the statistics and the polling data show without question. And Plouffe says it as a matter of fact, a few days after the 2016 election. He says we must win in 2020, and in order to win the African American vote in swing states like Wisconsin, and he even goes so far as to call out Milwaukee everything must be done to drive out the black vote. And so it was. Now, if this was just Joe Biden, someone might say, well, gee, what's wrong with that? Nothing if you're the candidate. The candidate's job in order to get elected is to identify people who are likely to vote for him or her, and then do everything they can to help that person get to the poll. That's what politicians do. But it's not what elections officials are supposed to do, who are supposed to be nonpartisan,
And is
who
that
are supposed to be transparent.
and is that the problem? The problem is that they were using governmental officials, buying governmental officials to do things that they were not authorized by law to be able to do.
Well, that and getting right at the heart of it, it is illegal. It is a crime in Wisconsin to give people money to get people to the polls. There was no other reason for Mark Zuckerberg and David Plouffe and CTCL to get Zuckerberg's millions of dollars to these mayors. The whole purpose was to get people to the polls, and not just any people, not everybody, but just a certain identifiable group of African Americans and others that they use this weird, false phrase of historically disenfranchised voters, which simply don't exist by definition. They all had everybody has the right to vote. Everybody and has for quite some time. And so that's the nub of the criminal case, which is it's illegal in Wisconsin to pay people to get others to the poll. And that's what the city was doing. That's what Zuckerberg was doing. That's what Plouffe was doing. That's what CTCL was doing.
Okay.
The second major finding of our report, and we're going to put this will be up on the website. The commission, we have this entity in Wisconsin called the Wisconsin Elections Commission. And the commission is supposed to help safeguard honest elections. And in this case, they simply went off the rails in a lot of different areas. They violated the law in a lot of different areas. But the most glaring one, where there's no question about it, and there's no question about their intent to violate the law. And when I talk about the commission, I'm now talking about the 6 members of the Wisconsin Election Commission. They're not elected, but they're appointed, 3 from each party, 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats, and they're appointed by the leaders of the legislature and the governor. Each of those people gets a certain number to appoint to the Wisconsin Elections Commission. But 5 out of the 6 commissioners consistently voted to ignore the law put in place for protecting the vulnerable residents of long-term care facilities, such as nursing homes. And what I mean by that is the law requires that the only people who can help residents of nursing homes vote are what the statutes call special voting deputies. And there are all sorts of regulations that govern the training and the conduct of special voting deputies. There's one from each party, 1 Republican, 1 Democrat, sent to each nursing home. And in our state, we've got 92,000 residents of nursing homes. And so the law requires special voting deputies, 1 from each party. They must go through a training program. They must take an oath to administer their ballot collection duties in a nonpartisan way. And the 5 out of 6 commissioners used COVID safety as an excuse to say, no, it's just too unsafe to send special voting deputies into the nursing homes. So we're simply going to ignore those laws, and we're going to also violate. They said this. I'm not in for. Check it out on Wisconsin EYE. You can go watch these WEC meetings from 2019 and 2020, where they're openly discussing. We know this is not the law. We know this is against the law, but we unelected commissioners, we are going to tell all of the clerks in this state to not send special voting deputies in to the nursing homes. And we are going to tell all the clerks in the state to ignore the law that prohibits a nursing home employee, excuse me, a nursing home employee from collecting ballots from residents. Obviously, the potential for undue influence of a nursing home employee, a caregiver, assisting, in quotation marks, a resident filling out the ballot, that's going to be awkward at best, and the law prohibits it for that reason. But Wisconsin Election Commission and the Racine County Sheriff, who really gets a lot of credit, Sheriff Schmaling and investigator Lieutenant Mike Llewell, they referred criminal charges against 5 out of the 6 commissioners to the district attorney of Racine County, who recently rejected prosecuting, but not on the merits, not for a substantive reason. She said that she didn't have jurisdiction over the 5 out of the 6, but it was clear that they violated the law. It was clear that these 5 out of 6 commissioners broke the law. And so you have all the records of people who clean the fish tank at the nursing homes. They're coming and going. Candy stripers, I don't know if you call them that anymore, but volunteer visitors, volunteers coming and going from the nursing homes. And that's okay. But when it comes to following the law and sending special voting deputies in, well, that's where they draw the line. That's where WEC says, no, we can't have that. We have to violate the law. And so you now have on Tuesday and up on the website, your listeners, Kim, will be able to see the video of 8 victims. Sometimes these things become abstract when the commission or anyone is meeting in the state capitol. I'm sure you've seen this play out any number of times, Kim, where the bureaucrats will come and they'll suggest a course of conduct, and you say to yourself, well, gee, that doesn't really sound right, but I guess I can see their point. And then they take you down the next step. They lead you down the primrose path. And then before you know it, you're in the middle of crazy world where nothing makes sense. And unless you call yourself back to reality, you wind up making crazy and illegal decisions like WEC did, like the 5 out of 6 commissioners at WEC did when they said, we're going to violate the law. And the result of that in the 5 Zuckerberg cities, in those nursing homes, the counties that they're located in, we saw 95% to 100% voter turnout. In other words, 100% of the residents, a minimum of 95%, and we saw a number of places where 100% voting turnout in these nursing homes, where the employees were allowed to so-called assist the residents in filling out the ballots. And we've heard things that would just curl your hair. And, well, if you vote for Biden, you can keep living here. But if you vote for Trump, then, your insurance won't pay for you to be here anymore. Who do you want to vote for? Now, that's anecdotal. I didn't put it in the report because a lot of people don't want to have their names entered into the public record. But you see 95%, 100% voter turnout, something has gone off the rails. And we showed these videos, and your listeners can go watch the videos. There are patients, residents of the nursing homes who've been under guardianship since the 1970s. And all of a sudden, their family, by checking the Wisconsin myvote.gov, they see that their relative, their mother, their dad, who hasn't been cognitively with it in years, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, they're voting once WEC violates the law and takes away the special voting deputies' protections for their parents. So we had 8 families, and one of the victims passed away, but we had 7 out of the 8 victims in the videotape. And a lawyer named Eric Cardall from the Thomas More Society, who's been doing excellent work on this issue and other issues related to related to election integrity. He conducted the interviews with the patients in the nursing homes, and your listeners, just like the people of Wisconsin, can judge for themselves if that person should have been voting.
No,
and it really is heartbreaking, and it's sad, and it's also maddening.
So will that information, or will those videos be up on the website too?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. I tell you what, I got 10 minutes left, so let's use our time as you see best in order to continue. And then I got a few questions when you get to a stopping point.
A lot of people ask me when I get done telling them about this, what can we do? What can we do? Here are three things. To get to the heart of it, we need to have accurate voting rolls in our state. And your listeners, like any reasonable person, would say, well, gee, that sounds like a no-brainer, Gableman. How is it that you spent 6 months studying this and that money, and you're saying it? Well, I'm telling you because our election officials at Wisconsin Election Commission deliberately keep false and inaccurate voter rolls. They keep dead people on the voter rolls. They keep people who've moved away on the voter rolls, so that we've got about 5.5 million people in Wisconsin, which yields about 4 million eligible voters. And if I asked any of your listeners, how many people do you think we have on the voting rolls? I assume they would say 4 million or less. Well, gee, you have 4 million eligible voters. And that would be a logical and reasonable guess to make. But the answer is we have over 7 million people on our voting rolls when we have a state with 4 million eligible voters. And so the first step is we make our voter rolls accurate. And we define accuracy and accurate voter rolls in the same ways that a reasonable person who's intent on being honest would define it, which would not include dead people. It would be live people, okay, people who are alive. It would not include people we know to have moved out of the state years ago. We'd have the people who are alive, and we'd have them registered on the voter rolls at the address that they actually live at. Okay, so that's step one, accurate voter rolls. Right now, if you or any citizen of Wisconsin or anybody else wanted a day's worth, one day, let's see, okay, for last Monday, who was on Wisconsin's voter rolls? Well, the Wisconsin Election Commission, the bureaucrats there will give that list, but first they'll want to collect from you $12,500, which is a completely artificial barrier to people finding out. The people of this state and the federal taxpayers, by their contributions, have already paid for that information. Rich people can buy it. Self-interested, partisan, private groups, so-called nonprofits, can buy it. But we need to make that information freely available to the people. Right now, I have WEC under subpoena for a year's worth of that information, which, if I had to pay for, would cost the taxpayers of the state about $4,300,000. And that's crazy. So let's have accurate voter rolls. Let's make those voter rolls freely available to the public. And then number three, once someone votes, put their names and addresses up on the internet. We have protections for some vulnerable people who are the beneficiaries of domestic abuse orders, where you don't want the stalker or the abuser to find out where she lives. And typically it is a she. And so, yes, it's common sense exceptions that the legislature might want to put into effect, but that would be a relatively minimal number. Now, I've heard different things. I was talking to someone from Utah, but let's just be common sense and reasonable about it. So accurate voter rolls available to everybody, and then once an election happens, within 48 hours, the names and addresses of everybody who voted goes up on the internet. And you know why? So that anyone who's interested can compare who are the eligible voters and who actually voted. There's such common sense, relatively budget neutral, if not cut the budget, because right now we're paying this outfit called ERIC, Electronic Registration Information Center, which was originally funded by George Soros and run by a guy named David Becker, who David Becker took the took the $70 million from Mark Zuckerberg. I already described the $330 million that Zuckerberg gave through David Plouffe to CTCL to then give to the states. But there's $70 million that your listeners are no doubt wondering. Hey, Gableman, you said $400 million at the beginning of this program. Yeah, the other $70 million went to this guy called David Becker, who operates in the shadows. He's a dark, very little known about him. He's been able to hide in the dark for a long, long time, but he has come to Wisconsin and he has become a deep player in our, and when I say player, I mean he's a manipulator of the Wisconsin elections administration. And we have to drag him out into the light of day. And he has now taken Zuckerberg's money, and he came to Wisconsin about 2 months ago, announcing that with the Zuckerberg money, he had founded the Election Official Legal Defense Fund in order to provide Zuckerberg-paid attorneys, lawyers paid for by Mark Zuckerberg, to any government official who does not want to answer the questions of the Office of Special Counsel, designed to try to find out what happened during the election. And this David Becker is the same one. And of course, this leftist newspaper in our state called the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. I call it, a lot of people call it the Milwaukee Urinal Sentinel. It was a once great newspaper, but now has turned to a business model of simply trying to gin up its leftist readership, mainly leftists and invalids who just simply don't know how to discontinue their subscription. But they covered David Becker and they said nonpartisan David Becker says that Wisconsin election officials administered the best election ever. And it's a shining example for the world. I'm not kidding you. That's what they said. But yet, here is David Becker taking $70 million of Mark Zuckerberg's money to provide lawyers to anyone who might have to answer questions about how they administered the public elections using public money. And my question is this: if they really ran the best election the world has ever seen, which is what David Becker says, why the hell do they need armies of out-of-state lawyers to keep from answering questions about it? No, who does that? Guilty people do that. That's people who know they've done wrong and who want to continue to cover up and hide their illegal and dishonest conduct. And the press isn't covering any of this. The mainstream media is so hateful. They hate Trump. And they don't care about Biden. They just know he's not Trump. But I suppose they like Biden's policies. So they don't want to know about Mark Zuckerberg's money. They don't want to know about David Becker coming in and running Eric to have deliberately false voter rolls. Our state and 30 other states subscribe to Eric. They pay hundreds of thousands of dollars a year per state. And the whole selling point is David Becker is supposed to provide Wisconsin with accurate voter rolls. When they do anything but, they are inaccurate and purposely so. And why would someone like David Becker have an interest in making sure that Wisconsin and other swing states' voter rolls are not accurate? Well, I hope I get the chance to find out. Okay. And right now I'm in discussions with the Speaker of the Assembly to see how and under what circumstances this investigation can continue.
All right. I'm down to like 2 minutes. I got 2 quick questions for you. Need quick answers. Is anybody going to go to jail? Anybody going to be prosecuted for this?
I can't say for sure. I know the criminal charges have been referred. I know the DA who they were referred to said, yes, crimes occurred. And the ones who are suspected of doing it committed the criminal acts. And that she's hoping that someone who she thinks has jurisdiction over it will take up the prosecution. But I can't answer that yes or no.
Okay. Second thing is, in other swing states, are they doing what you did in Wisconsin, or should all 50 states do this, or just the swing states that are under question?
I think anywhere where David Plouffe and CTCL were actors, after Tuesday, after my 3.5-hour presentation before our state assembly, I heard from representatives of other states who said that it seemed that I was describing during my presentation precisely what went on in their states. So anywhere where Mark Zuckerberg and George Soros and David Becker and David Plouffe and CTCL, any state where they took a part in administering the elections, we need to take a deep dive into finding out what and how they did it.
Okay. All right. Let me give Clint 30 seconds. Go ahead. Sorry, man.
No, that's okay. I've enjoyed the working with Justice Gableman, and it's been a very insightful thing to be able to help fight for fair elections somewhere else, because while we don't have that problem in Arkansas, my vote doesn't count to the same effect if we have this problem in Wisconsin. So I appreciate the opportunity to work for Justice Gableman, and thank you for coming on the show.
Hey, Justice, let me ask you, would you be willing to come back on? Because there's maybe for 30 minutes, I got a few follow-up things. You've laid the groundwork really well.
Anytime.
Good deal. I'll get you through Clint. I appreciate you coming on. We'll go up to those websites. You've been listening to The Kim Hammer Show, www.thekimhammershow.com. Or remember, go up there to wielectionreview.org, wielectionreview.org, in order to get information that's been shared on the show today. Thank you for joining me. Have a great Saturday.